Assembly member here and the team as well. If you have any questions, please refer to the chat. I also have my team answering it, and we also have our office's information on it as well.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you so much to Assemblymember Jackson, making the opportunity for me to speak to everybody. You're all, I imagine, constituents within the district, and you have a really good one. So be thankful. I wish that I had such good representation. She's really doing wonderful things for not only her district, but the city of New York. So thank you, Assembly Member. Really appreciate it. So let me start, and thank you all for joining tonight. I know everybody's really busy, and I would encourage you, just first and foremost, like, please come off camera, come on camera just for a little bit. Say hi. I know you might be eating dinner, or, running around, taking kids somewhere, or doing whatever you got to do. But it's always nice to see faces and just be able to connect with people. I just don't want to look at myself the whole time. So please feel free. I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about my background and how I got into real estate. And then I think, just to help, as much as I can, we'll open this up to questions, and I'll try and field as many as I possibly can. And I'll give you the best possible answer that I can give you. I'm a developer, so effectively I'm the producer of the movie. So I hire the architects, who are the writers of the script, so to speak, and then the actors, who are the construction workers, and maybe some of the other consultants. So I know a little bit about everything in the industry, but I'm certainly not as knowledgeable as, the architect about architecture, or the lawyer about, contracts or zoning law, or the environmental consultants, or the structural or mechanical engineer. But I will do everything that I can to answer the questions and try to point you in the right direction if you are interested in getting into real estate, or just, buying a home, or having issues with your landlord, or whatever it may be. Just use me as a real estate sounding board for the next hour. So first and foremost, I'm a born and bred New Yorker. I grew up in Manhattan. I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I went away to college, and I started studying to be a doctor. I took biology, and it just didn't resonate with me. So I took an art history class, and my parents looked at me and said, "What the hell are you going to do with art history? How are you ever going to survive?" And I kind of thought, at least I'm going to learn how to write, and that's a valuable skill. So I'll have to write papers. And, kind of organically over the next couple of years, I took an architecture class, really started to like it, thought I wanted to be an architect, went and did a program to do architecture and urban planning after I graduated college. Looked around, and every other student there was so much more talented than me. They were literally putting together the Taj Mahal with toothpicks, and I could barely draw a stick figure. And I thought to myself, I am in the wrong place. Like, this is not for me. And I was kind of disappointed. So I went back to my dorm room, and I started reading my course book, because I still was interested in it. And I read about the developer, and I said, okay, this guy is the one who puts the project together, hires the architect, raises the capital, has the power. That's who I want to be. What am I doing here, being, an architecture and urban planning school? So I went back home. I applied to 100 different developers. No one was willing to give me a shot at an interview. Nothing. Like, no experience. They were like, forget about it. So I enrolled at NYU. They do, there's a school for continuing and professional studies at NYU. And you can take like one or off classes there. And so I enrolled to take a class in real estate. And ultimately, I ended up matriculating through that program to get a master's. But in my first semester, I did a project on a building called the Empire Stores in Dumbo. It's this beautiful old Civil War warehouse on the waterfront in Brooklyn. And I had to do an appraisal project. So I was tasked by my professor to figure out, how do I value this building? So I called who ended up being my former employer, Two Trees. And I said, tell me what the rental rates in the neighborhood are. Tell me what the vacancy rates. And I got passed around from like different people in the office. No one wanted to talk to me. They're like, who's this annoying kid who keeps calling? And finally, one person needed, was willing to help me out. And he said, come on into the office and I'll chat with you. And I'm a big believer in persistence in life to get what you want. So I was not willing to take no for an answer at that point. I asked everybody at that office. I called the office 20 times a day until finally they had to kind of take me. So I went in, I met with him. He said, when you finish your project, let's talk. And I went back in after I finished my project. I told him what I valued the building at. He said, great, that's what our professional appraisers got. We're close to it. Would you like an internship here? And I said, absolutely. So I took an internship and I started working. And it was great because it was, I had some money coming in while I was taking classes. Wasn't a ton, but it was wages. And so about 6 months after that, while I was still in school, the guy who I was interning with quit. And he was super burnt out. And my boss, the owner of the company, was like, look, he says you're a relatively smart guy. I'm not quite sure where he got that information from, but he was like, if you want, you can take over for him and, you'll start as a project manager. And I said, amazing. It was my opportunity, right? It was my foot in the door to finally do something. And I started out literally running coffee to like site superintendents and project managers. I was just errand boy. They were like, you do this, you do that. And I was like, whatever I can do, I don't care, because I was learning through osmosis, just being around these people. Like I was learning. And so I was like, whatever you need me to do. And steadily worked my way up in that company with that same mentality, whatever I could do to help, until 2013 when I left. And so that was about 8 years. I left in 2013 to start my own company. I got married, quit my job, and had my first kid all within the same 12-month period, not necessarily in that order. And everyone I knew thought I was insane. They were just like, you're having a baby and like, you don't have a job. Like, what are you doing? But I kind of realized at that point, if I didn't take the risk to go out on my own and be an entrepreneur and start being a real estate developer, that I was never going to take that risk. The responsibilities were just going to keep getting bigger and bigger as I got married and had a kid and had more children later on in life. So I said, this is the time, and I did it. And it was the hardest year of my life. What literally should have been, the best year, getting married, having a beautiful daughter, my daughter, Abigail, was the hardest year of my life, because I had saved up enough money that would allow me to live for a few months. And I took a little bit of that money and I put a deposit down on a piece of land in Long Island City. So this piece of land was a $11 million acquisition. So it's not a small acquisition, but I was used to building big buildings at Two Trees. And I knew that I had to do something large for scale, and really to get a fee coming in for myself, a developer fee and a general contractor fee, because I build for myself. I'm my own general contractor as well. So I knew that I had to do something that at least gave me enough fee money to live off of. Even if the project didn't make any money, at least I would have a salary coming in for myself. And so I had to put down a $1 million deposit. I had, of that 1 million, maybe $100,000 to put up. And that then allowed me like another few months to live. And before I would have to go back to my old job and like grovel and pray that they would take me back. So the only thing I knew was that I had no idea where I was getting my money from. So I negotiated with the seller and I said, look, give me a 1-year close. I'll pay you your asking price. You want $11 million? I will pay you $11 million. I won't even negotiate it, but I need 1 full year to close. That's kind of unheard of in the real estate world. Most people, want you to close in 2 months, 3 months. They don't want to give you a free option basically to hold their real estate for a year. But he was willing to do it because he got his number. So I went around to as many people who were willing to listen. I was out in, the Grand Havana cigar bar in the evenings because people invited me, inhaling secondhand cigar smoke everywhere. Just, Reverend Al Sharpton at the table next to me, smoking 50 cigars and just going around table to table, literally with the hat out, just want to invest in my project, want to invest in my project. I had parents who invested. I had aunts and uncles. I had friends. I mean, we were taking $25,000 checks, $50,000 checks. It did not matter. If you were interested and believed in me, I was happy to take your money and make you money, or at least attempt to make you money. So we raised our $1 million. We put a deposit down. Now I needed to start designing the building because I needed to figure out where am I going to get the rest of my money from. This was a $30 million project. So where am I getting my debt? What bank is going to lend me money? Where am I getting the rest of the equity? So let's assume that like on a regular real estate structure of 100%, which is the capital stack, maybe the equity is 30% or 40%, and the debt is 60%. So a bank is going to give you 60%. You're going to have to get the other 40%. I had no idea where I was getting any of this, but all I knew was I had to keep the project moving. So fast forward another 3 months, land values in Long Island City took off, which is where that first piece of property was. And the seller said to me, I'm not selling to you anymore. And I said, what do you mean you're not selling to me anymore? We have a contract. You have to sell to me. He said, well, the land's worth significantly more. I'm backing out of the contract and sue me if you want. So I then had to hire lawyers, figure out how am I going to get this piece of land. And I was very honest and forthcoming with him at first. I said to him, this is my first project. I'm going to, I'm going to use friends and family money. So bear with me when I gave him that, when I asked for the 1-year close. And he took advantage of that and understood that I had all of my money tied up. I didn't have the luxury of being able to sue him for a year to win for specific performance. And then he could throw it into the appeals court for another 2 years and completely tie me up and screw me. So I was pretty scared at that moment. And to make matters worse, I had met somebody who was selling a piece of land in Jersey City. And because I am crazy or stupid, I don't know whatever way you want to look at it, I said, let me put down another deposit at that point on a piece of land in Jersey City, because I think that the guy who owns it doesn't know that he can build as much as you can build. He thought you could build a 4-story building there. I had read the zoning text and understood that you could actually build a 13-story building. So I knew there was value. And I said, fine, I'm going to tie it up. And I did the same thing. I said, I need a 6-month close though. And he said, okay, no problem. And so fast forward, we're going now another 2 months or so. And I remember being on the phone with my father, with my wife, and he asked me, is everything okay? And I said, it's fine. And I hung up the phone and I had told my wife that if things did not work out in the next like 2 months or so, that we were pitching a tent in my dad's living room. And that's where we were living with my daughter and, with my newborn daughter. And that was it. And I was going to go, beg for my job back. And then I got off the phone with him and I started crying. And it was the first time in, I don't know, 20 years that I had cried or something. And it really all hit me at once. The gravity of the moment that like I had left a job that was keeping me day to day, putting food on the table, allowing me to do what I wanted to do in my life for some crazy unknown that I had no idea what was going to happen. And unbelievably lucky, and it's better to be lucky than smart a lot of times in real estate. I was able to find somebody who wanted to buy the piece of Jersey City land for me. And he actually bought my contract. So I didn't even close on the land. I flipped the contract to this private equity firm. And that was like up until the day of that closing, it was a simultaneous closing. So what that means is that he was going to close with me and pay me some money to get my contract. And then we were going to close with the seller who we had a contract with. If he did not close on that day and I was forced to close, I would have been screwed. I would have lost everything. Like I'd already spent money on lawyers and, architects and everything else. And that was the end. And I remember the night before not sleeping one bit. And the next day, the closing happened, and I looked at my, the wires happened and the emails happened, and they said wire received. And I looked at my bank account and I was like, I made more money than I just made in the last 5 years working on my job. This was the greatest thing that ever happened. And I could not believe it. And
You have a quick question?
Anytime. The
yep,
member has a question, sorry.
yeah, please.
Not so much a question as, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, my Wi-Fi did something weird, but just really wanted to address everyone, say thank you for being here and get an understanding of what they're looking for so we can make sure that we answer those questions. You guys have already heard a lot of Sam's background, and I'm sure he'll share more
Oh yeah.
about his first deal and how difficult it was and how long it took. And so we want to get an understanding of what you all are looking for from tonight so that we can be mindful that we're staying on track and on task.
Yes, definitely.
And Sam, what you just shared sounded like wholesaling. So there's a group of people who look for homes that look like they aren't, being utilized, no one lives there. And they get that home under contract with the seller, and then they find a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And then they may charge the buyer maybe $10,000, but ultimately the buyer is buying the contract, but they still have an agreement with the person who already owned the property. So
Yep.
the person in between, even though that's not necessarily what Sam is doing, but the person in between, we sometimes call wholesalers, and New York is putting a stop to that. So I could also talk about the government part, to like what
Sure.
works and what doesn't work. But I just want to get an idea from everyone here. What are you guys looking to hear? What can we talk to you about?
Can I wrap real quick and
Yeah,
then
of course.
and then we'll open it up to the floor? Okay, cool. So anyway, that moment was the impetus for me starting my company. Really, like it was either fall off a cliff or like get some capital injected, hire people. We were then able to close on the land in Long Island City afterwards. And now we're building 1,200 units in the Gowanus. We're under contract to build another 1,000. We are building 600 units here in Long Island City, and we're doing 200 units in downtown Brooklyn. Most of our projects are under the Affordable New York Tax Abatement Program. So they have deeply affordable units. A percent of the project, 25%, is deeply affordable and permanently affordable. And I am a big believer in these tax abatement programs that allow for the creation of mixed income buildings, because that's the New York City I like to be in. That's the New York City I grew up in. That's the New York City I want to see. I don't want to see a New York City that is dominated by hedge funders and ridiculously rich people, and then everybody else is pushed to the outskirts. That doesn't make for an interesting, enjoyable cultural experience, which is what brings people to New York in the first place. So anyway, that's it. Enough about me. I'll tell you more if you want to hear more. But yeah, I'm more than happy to answer questions. I don't know how you want to do it, Assembly Member, if you want people to raise hands or put it in the chat, but whatever.
Yeah, I think the raise hand function is helpful, and then calling people and they can
Cool.
share out their question. Also, you can use the chat. I see Dan.
you
You
have
have
one
your
hand
hand up.
raised.
And let's be mindful of everyone's time, so we can keep the questions to a minute, and then we'll respond.
I'm happy to go a little longer too, by the way, if you guys
Okay.
need. So, I want to make sure everyone gets.
And if we could do some general definitions, that'd be helpful. But go ahead, Daniel.
I have a two-part question. So a few years back, I was part of a REIT, and I didn't proceed with it because I didn't have the detail that was needed in order to proceed, and what the ending outcome of that would have been. And so my first question is, do you think that a REIT investment is a good idea? And the turnover on that. That's the first question. Second question is, I see that you got into real estate with the purpose at some point, but the funds and the way you was able to establish your first property, you didn't really disclose that. It kind of made it seem as if it was just kind of easy. We got $1 million and we just, what was
Sure.
that process in order for you to have? Was that borrowed money? Was that did you have a
Yeah.
savings settled somewhere? Like,
Great
how
question.
did that accumulate to be able to do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure there's many of us here and other places who have that issue, not understanding the finances of how that is to establish your first property without the adequate funding.
Absolutely. So awesome questions. I'll talk quickly about the REIT and then I'll go on because I have more expertise in developing, raising capital, and trying to, teach you guys how to get into this. So REITs are, an investment vehicle, just like buying a stock or a bond, right? I think like they're all very specific depending on what REIT you're buying. Like you could buy a REIT based in New York multifamily, or you could buy a REIT based in Europe or South America. I can't really tell you what I think of the REIT market. I know generally speaking, REITs have done well. I try to avoid investing my money in any public kind of entity. Like I don't buy stocks, bonds. I don't have an investment portfolio. I reinvest. And look, that's just because I don't have the ability to diversify because I own a business. We have 25 plus people that work here. Their families, depend on their salaries and being able to go home and put food on the table. And so I have to keep reinvesting in my business, keep doing projects. So I don't have the ability to be, putting my money into a REIT, let alone Amazon or the S&P 500. But I do think those things make money. I mean, people do very well in those markets. In terms of my capital and how I started, I probably had, I would say, about $150,000 saved up over, call it 15 years of working. Okay. And a little bit of like grandparents passed away and left me something. Okay. But that even of itself is not necessarily relevant because I could 150 on a $30 million project I was doing is literally a drop in the bucket. It's nothing. Like I could have started with zero. It would have been the same thing. I raised $1 million initially from friends, family, and anybody who would listen. And I took their money in as equity, not as debt. So it was not a loan. It was an investment in the project. And the terms were invest with me and I will double your money, which is a very standard real estate investment parameter, especially in development deal. Somebody says, I'll give you $100. I want to walk out of the deal with 200. That's, and that happens over like a 3 to 4 year period. So that was a pretty standard way of raising capital. And I went out and I just talked to as many people who were willing to listen. And once you got one person who was willing, who believed in you, they would tell a friend or somebody else. And you were able to then, it was a lot of networking. I mean, I was out last night in a restaurant, just talking to people and raising capital. I would have much rather been home with my wife and kids, but I had to be out doing it because we're raising for a project right now. And you need to be able to use other people's money. I think a lot of people out there think that developers have kind of all of the money and, use their own money, but we really don't. Unless you're like a multi-generational real estate family, generally speaking, you don't use your own money. You're borrowing money and you're borrowing friends and family money and you're borrowing institutional capital from the Goldman Sachs's of the world and the larger private equity firms. And I'll talk more about that. That'll be a common theme, by the way, as we go. I'm sure many more people will, want to hear the same thing.
And I don't want to assume everyone knows everything that's being discussed. So we have to definitely give context. So a REIT, like I typed in the chat, is a real estate investment trust. And think about just a bunch of different people who own property in one investment trust, and you pay for the REIT. I just hope that wasn't gunshots.
Was.
Okay.
It was popcorn.
It definitely was.
It was popcorn,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen, popcorn.
I doubt it. But okay, so so we have that understanding. And then there's some questions. Vlad, did you want to go and then we can answer the questions in the chat?
Yes. I have a question. May I ask it, please? Okay.
Yes.
Just to jump in, how are you, Sam? I heard you mention affordable housing and mixed use apartments. So this is a two-part question. My first question is, what is the difference between affordable housing and mixed use apartments and its benefits for the community? And
Mixed income, you mean,
mixed
right? Not
income?
mixed use, yeah. Mhm.
Correct. And for the
That's something else. Mixed use is something else.
Right.
agreed.
Mixed use is cooking and sleeping in your same, you know, like
Yeah,
cooking,
having a business,
running a restaurant, running a
business,
restaurant.
and then you live above the business. Yeah.
Yes, that's
That's
right.
why Sam is the expert. Thank you so much, Sam. My second question is thank you so much for sharing the fact of how you had to literally put boots on the ground to raise capital. Can you tell us any sorts of techniques to raising capital, whether it be in our attire or the language of usage, or even in the introductions, like some tips and tricks on how to raise capital for these
Sure.
sorts of projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, it's important that you have your business plan put together, right? You can't just go out to somebody and say, I'm going to go buy some buildings, want to give me some money. You have to have a building that you've targeted that, you know, maybe it's ideally in your neighborhood. It's something that you have local knowledge about, right? You say, I live a block away from here, or I live 5 blocks away from here. I know what I pay in rent. I know what the rest of my building pays. That building is not getting enough rent, or that building is vacant, and I know that I can renovate it and I can charge X, Y, and Z. And here's what the profit's going to be when I sell the building or when I get a refinance when the building is done. So you have to have all of that and really know it well, because people are going to grill you. It's like going on the Shark Tank, right? And you know, the sharks are going to be there and they're going to be asking you questions. And if you don't have answers for them like that, they're not going to believe in you. You know, the other thing I would say is just like, you have to be persistent and you have to not get discouraged when you get turned down. I've gotten turned down so many times in my life, like whether it was, you know, asking out the girl that I wanted to go out with or raising capital. Like I have done it and been shot down more times than I have been given an opportunity. And each time I get up and I dust myself off and I say, I'm just going to go right back out and do it, because there's no other possible outcome for me than getting it done. I always believe that, like, if I put my head down and I keep going for it, I'm going to be able to make it happen. So you have to have confidence in yourself and you have to not get discouraged when you get knocked down.
I have one more question since we have the assembly member on the line. Let's say I've identified a property and I'm in the process of securing the capital. Let's say I wanted to build an extra floor on top of that particular property, or let's say the property is vacant, completely vacant, and I want to build like a 5-story unit. Can you tell me what is that called? What is the process? Should I go to my assembly member? Is it an easy process? Do you have any tips and tricks? How can you help? How can the member help? Please.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think first and foremost, if you do want to do something like that and you're really interested in learning about what the highest and best use for buildings in New York is, all of that information is public. You can go online to New York City's Department of City Planning's website, and you can read that. Don't read the zoning resolution. That is thousands of pages of zoning legalese and jargon. Read the zoning, it's called the zoning handbook, and it's literally like zoning for dummies. And I used to keep that book on my desk at all times, and I would just refer to it. And it just tells you, like, and then you can look at a zoning map online and you can see, and you can pull up the exact building and you can see, oh, that building has a floor area ratio, which is effectively like a height of 3 or 4. And that's only built to 2 stories. So I can add a story or I can add 2 stories. I would not encourage anybody here to go look for something that requires a rezoning or a ULURP, something that you would then talk to your assembly member about, because that
City
takes a long time and you have to have control of the asset over that period.
Yes, member, did you want to say something?
I was saying you need to talk to your city council person, not necessarily.
I agree,
your
right.
member.
Yes,
I mean,
you're right.
yeah,
You talk to your
definitely
council person first.
zoning
That's
is definitely a council person. I mean, we all have relationships, but it has to go through city council anyway.
That's right. That's right. And yeah, and to your first point, Vlad, mixed income buildings are buildings where income bands are spread throughout the building. So there are lotteries for people who qualify for certain apartments based on their income, and there are different income bands. And those buildings are generally mixed with market rate apartments as well. And they're also spread throughout the floors. And the reason I love that is because you end up with, you know, the hardworking, you know, mom who's working 3 jobs to put food on the table in an apartment next to, you know, a finance person's child or a lawyer's child. And they're going to go to the same school because they're in the same school district, and they're going to become friends. And then the parents are going to hang out. And, you know, if you put yourself in communities like that, I think it's a great way to be able to increase the wealth all around for everybody, not just for, you know, the 1%. So I'm a big believer in that, as opposed to like all affordable housing projects where you don't have the same integration of income bands.
And Natasha, we see your hand, but there was a question in the chat we want to get to, and then we'll get to you, Natasha.
So we have Lauren. She's a virtual assistant. She says she's recently started working as a transaction coordinator, and she's here because she's eager to expand her knowledge of real estate while focusing directly on the real estate side. She believes it's valuable to learn more about the industry to better support her clients and grow in her role.
No,
And
I was
then-
talking about the question. The question was from
okay, so one of our constituents said she's looking to purchase a single family home. What advice can you give her?
Cool. Who's a single family home buyer out here?
if you could acknowledge yourself, raise your hand in chat or unmute.
Ms. Moles?
Unmute, come on video, please, whoever you are.
And I'll start and then we'll find her. The good thing about single family homes, right, is that it's going to be a piece of investment. And there are plenty of banks that does first time home buyer seminars, which I encourage you all to go to, just to get a feel of the field of the you know, what's happening. You get to learn the language and get to meet with people who allow you to get loans to help you purchase your home. The other thing that you want to work on also is your credit, which we did do a credit 101 webinar before, and I'm sure we'll do another one again. So we definitely want to be mindful of our credit, making sure our credit score is high enough and all the things that don't belong on our credit report are not there. So first-time homebuyers seminars, working on credit and increasing your savings. I think those are definitely my tips when you want to look at when you're looking at buying your first home. And Sam, if you can actually talk to buying a multi-family home versus a single family home, because we're really focusing on the investment part of this conversation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to add to the single family home conversation, there are a lot of great programs at the federal level that you can look into that will give you significant amounts of debt, like at what's called a loan to value ratio. So they'll lend 1% of the total purchase price. And a lot of these special programs, if you've served in the military, I know there are great programs that you can get, 90-95% loan to value. So, your house costs $100,000, you're potentially coming out of pocket $5,000 to buy that home. So just something to, keep in the back of your mind, and there are programs. Multifamily is different. So multifamily, when you buy a multifamily building, generally speaking, it gets financed off of its rent roll. So let's say a building makes $100,000 a year. The lender will look at that and say, I need to solve for what's called a DSCR, which is a debt service coverage ratio. So that means that if they're giving you, let's say the building makes $100,000 a year and it costs $1 million. If you are borrowing from the bank $600,000, $700,000, something like that, the bank needs to make sure that their monthly payment to you to cover your monthly payment to cover the mortgage is easily going to be covered by what the rent roll is minus the expenses of the building. So they're never going to give you more money than what the building itself can support. And that's just a simple calculation. It's called the debt service coverage ratio, DSCR. And you can Google that and look it up. And generally speaking, a bank is trying to solve for a 1.2 to 1.25 DSCR. So once you know what your net operating income is, you take your revenue, your top line revenue, so the amount of rent the building makes, minus the expenses. So your utilities, your real estate taxes, and miscellaneous expenses to, fix for capital improvements or to clean or whatever it may be. That will give you what's called a net operating income, your NOI. That's your bottom line. That's how much the building is going to make. And then the bank will look at that and say, okay, this is the NOI. I will lend you X amount of money based on this debt service coverage ratio. And then that gap between what the bank's willing to lend you, and again, let's use the $1 million example. If it's $1 million and the bank says, I will lend you $600,000, you will have to solve for that $400,000. And I know that sounds like a lot of money and a daunting task, and it is a lot of money. The way these deals generally get structured is in a 90-10 type scenario. So what does that mean? It means 90% of the $400,000 is going to come from other people, not from you. Generally, investors want to see that you have 10%, in the case like this, maybe 5% of equity in the deal. So if it was $400,000 that we were trying to raise and we were doing a 90-10 deal, we would be doing $40,000 of our own money and $360,000 from investors. So, and by the way, your 40 then, you can go and syndicate out to other people if you wanted to. They just want to make sure that you have skin in the game, so to speak. But, if you then said, I'm going to take my 40 and I'm going to try to raise, in $10,000 or $5,000 increments from other people, you can do that also. And what you'll do generally in a very simplified way is say, you give me 90% of the capital, other investors, I will put my 10% in, and we will split the profit in some sort of way, whether it's, 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30, you are effectively making what's called a promote. You are making money off of other people's money because of your expertise. Because you found the building, because you know how to renovate the apartments, because you know how to lease them for more, because you're going to manage the building, whatever it may be, you are entitled to a disproportionate share of the profit than the amount of capital that you put in, because you are bringing expertise and the deal to the table. So that's on a very simple level how to structure a multifamily deal.
And thank you for that. I do want to be mindful of everyone's time. We have 6:46. I know I want to allow the person who asked the question to ask a clarifying question. And then, of course, we see you, Natasha, Tiara, and Ibrahima. Ibrahima, I think that's correct. Whose question was that, Crystal?
Mr. Moise.
Mr. Moise, I know you asked about single family. Is there any clarifying question you want to ask, Sam?
I think, he answered everything that I needed to know. So, thank you.
Okay. So I just want to, so I know that the American dream is to have like your single home and your white picket fence and your 2 kids, but I also want us to consider investment properties being our first instead of being in a single family home, because you can get, and then Sam, you correct me if I'm wrong, If you get a multifamily home, right? Say you get a multifamily, you can get 4 families in a home. You live in one of those homes, you can use different types of loans to help pay for your mortgage. So can you talk to that, Sam?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's look at a building and say, I'm going to buy this building. It's $500,000, let's say $500,000, and it's 4 units or 5 units. Ideally, if the building makes enough money, you might be able to live for free. It's all going to come down to the calculation of how much the building makes versus how much the bank is willing to lend you, and then what your investors are looking to get. Or if you're not going to bring in investors, and let's just say you're going to buy it yourself, and maybe you get a great loan that gives you 90 or 95%, and you're able to do that with money that you've saved up, you will create some real equity for yourself, and you'll ideally be able to raise unit pricing every year. One thing to be very careful and mindful of in this situation, though, is rent stabilization. And if the building has been rent stabilized, to make sure that the paperwork is perfect, because unfortunately, there were some bad apples over the years who deregulated buildings improperly. And there were also just, mom and pop owners who didn't keep the greatest records because they were working full-time jobs and they weren't bookkeepers. So, or lawyers. And, if you don't have perfect paperwork with a rent stabilized building, it's very possible that a tenant can challenge you and say, well, did you properly increase the rent over the years? And the onus is on you then as the owner to prove that you did. And if you cannot prove that you increased the rents, legally over the years, the rent can potentially be set back to a very low value. So you can really lose, almost everything if you're not very careful buying a building like that. So just make sure you do your diligence and always ask the owner for all of the paperwork, the DHCR filings every year, and all of the records to make sure that they actually did what they were supposed to do.
Yep. Natasha, we see you.
Hi, Sam. I had a question about, so I serve on a board of a nonprofit that services Southeast Bronx. And we have 2 properties that we wanted to develop into affordable housing. So I wanted to know, could you speak about that? Do you have any experience working with nonprofits and also in terms of raising funds to develop properties from a nonprofit perspective?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we work with not-for-profits all over the city. When we develop in neighborhoods, we always want to be supportive of the institutions that have made the neighborhood great. So like, whether we're developing in Gowanus and working with Arts Gowanus and Powerhouse Arts and Gowanus Canal Conservancy, or here in Long Island City, we spent a week ago, we were at 9 Million Reasons, helping them pass out food, and doing whatever we could to help their organization. In terms of working with a not-for-profit to build on their behalf, I have spoken with many not-for-profits over the years about this, churches in particular. We've gotten close to making a deal happen, but it's never happened. But it does happen all the time. And generally what happens is the not-for-profit will contribute their land to a joint venture agreement. The developer will then, whether that land has a certain value attributed to it or not, depends on the neighborhood and what we think the value of the land is. And then the developer will go out and try to secure financing and try to build the project. And then there will be some sort of split in ownership in kind of the similar way that you would split on the private sector level with your investors. The not-for-profit will then become your investor, so to speak. And so you will split with them whatever the proceeds are of building this project. And if you wanted to build an all affordable project, like a 420C project, there actually wouldn't be profit in the project because those projects are sponsored by HPD. HPD actually gives money to private developers to build that housing because it's just not profitable to build those projects, pun intended with the not-for-profit. So, you know, but they're fee projects. So the city might say, we'll pay you a construction management fee and we'll pay you a developer fee to build the building. And if the developer found it worthwhile, they would split those proceeds on some level with the not-for-profit. Maybe the not-for-profit wants space that they build back, and the developer would build them back some space too. It's a great partnership, and it's really the way stuff like that gets done. So I would encourage you to, you know, speak with a developer you might have a relationship with, and see if you can make something happen. And if you'd like to run it past me in more specifics, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you.
So we have 6:53. I know some people have to leave, but Sam said he'll stay with us. Tiara, the Ibrahima, then I think my team knows who's next. Tiara?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, good evening.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I wanted to know, forgot my question. So with regards to affordable housing, who determines the income brackets for a particular project? And what factors into deciding the income brackets? Like, this building is going to have the income limit of $30,000 to $50,000, and this building is going to be $100,000 to $150,000.
Great question. So a couple of things. Zoning, in a lot of cases, will mandate what the income bands are. So, for example, like we're building in a neighborhood in Brooklyn in the Gowanus that got rezoned. That means that any project in that rezoning has to be a part of what's called mandatory inclusionary housing. So that's MIH, and it's MIH1 or MIH2. Those state that you have to build 25% of your project at what's called 60 AMI. So that's an average median income. So you can go on the HPD website and look at what income qualifies for 60 AMI, and it will tell you, you know, say one person home has to make this, 2-person home has to make this. So that's mandated. Now, if I'm building in a neighborhood that was not rezoned, just let's say as of right, like I decided to buy a piece of land and the city hadn't done anything with it, I then have the option, for the most part, to choose what program I'm going to go with at different income bands. And so now,
please.
What's that?
Oh, sorry.
And so, you know, there was more flexibility under the old 421A program for developers to choose what income band they were going to do. Now there's not a lot of flexibility, and depending on the size of the project, there's even less flexibility. But if you Google 485X, that's the new program, it will tell you all of, like, there's like a fact sheet you can find online. It will tell you all of the income bands for each project. And if you want to live in one of these buildings, and look, I encourage everyone that I know who qualifies, you know, for these income bands to go and try to live in one of these buildings, because they're incredible. Like, you're going to get market rate amenities, you know, you're going to have beautiful finished apartments. So I would encourage you to go to HPD's website. They keep showing the lotteries for all of the apartment buildings that are offering lotteries in different income bands, and just apply to as many as you can. And hopefully, you know, you'll land one. Because they're out there, and we're building as many as we can right now.
Yeah, those are almost impossible to get.
They are. They're super hard. But you know what the interesting thing is, Assembly Member, the people who run the lottery process do such a bad job of qualifying people, and that's why we aren't filling these apartments. So I think if you really work to get your stuff in together, your application together, you have your tax returns ready, you have everything that you need, you'll qualify and then ideally get placed. Because there is a lot of that product that's getting built. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because Housing Connect and HPD, we actually my office met with them, 3 weeks ago. And they are going to do a webinar and training for my staff, and then they'll do something for the community to pretty much show you all how they run their process and how you get chosen for those lottery houses. So stay tuned for that, everyone. That will be coming up shortly. So Ibrahima, thank you, Tiara. Ibrahima, you're next. And if I'm not saying that right, please correct me.
Nah, you said that perfectly.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for the information.
nice to meet
I
you.
wanted to say that again. I didn't hear you.
I said, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Sam. I really appreciate you. This information, you're giving this information to the community. And thank you for your time. You feel
Of
me?
course.
So the question that I have for you, can I be greedy and ask for 3 questions?
That's up to the assembly member.
Do one for me, and then we'll come back to you and do the other 2 and 3.
All
So
right,
do one now, and then we'll circle back to you, because we just got a running list.
No problem. So my question is in regards to like businesses that already have like their certifications and like minority like women businesses, what like developer programs would you recommend that for starters, like for somebody that have like no experience in developing homes? What's some programs that you would recommend to them? But they're a business person, but they would you basically recommend to them, and how would you leverage those developer programs? So like if you have like any programs like the Hub Zone, which ones would you recommend for us?
That's a great question. So MWBE stuff certification will allow you to qualify for certain RFPs that are being put out by the city or the state. And it's fantastic that there are opportunities to get more minority and women-owned businesses into, being selected through the city or state. Now, that being said, those MWBs are generally very experienced developers. They're not beginners. So what I would tell you is there are probably programs out there in terms of like financing that are set up specifically. Maybe it's through like a local credit union, or, other local banks that might work with like the federal government to get financing for you. I don't know enough about it, so I'm probably not the right guy to talk about there. But I know that on like on the city state RFP level, there definitely are MWBE opportunities. And those opportunities are not just to develop, those are opportunities to get government contracts. Those are opportunities, as a general contractor. Like if you're a GC and you want to go out and do some work for the city or the state, if you have an MWB certification, you can absolutely opt in to some of these RFPs. But as a first time developer, if it's something you want to do, I would focus on, are there MWBE programs out there for financing? And I would definitely speak to your local banks or credit unions and see what exists, and maybe do a little Googling. And then, try to buy your first asset, whatever you can. And just we can chat more then about how to go out and finance and raise capital and get you started.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate you.
My pleasure.
Ms. Jackson, thank you. I appreciate you.
Oh, no, of course. And that makes me remember what I wanted to share with you guys earlier, is that we may not be at this space and time to purchase the $1 million building. Like, I don't know who Sam friends are, but I gotta be friends with them. My friends are not giving me $10,000, $15,000, $50,000. All right. And if you're in the same situation as me, where your friends just don't have it laying around, there are other things you can do within real estate to get you ready, to have you, save up some money so that you can make your first big purchase or not. And other jobs that people don't think about, but is a part of real estate, is like being an appraiser, right? We don't have enough people of color in that space. And we've seen reports where there is implicit bias that happens within people getting their homes appraised, right? So one couple will have their home decorated and it's clearly a Black family that lives there. The appraiser comes in and they value at a lower amount when they than when they change the home to just look like a very traditional home with no inclination of the person's race or ethnicity. And they appraise the same exact property for higher. So those things do happen. So we need appraisers in that field. We also need developers like Sam. We need realtors, right? Realtors and brokers, like all of these people make up the dynamics for us to purchase real estate. So
Can I add to that for a sec?
Yes.
I agree 100%. Like there are, like becoming a developer is an apprentice business. It takes years and years to learn how to do this stuff. Like, but there's a great way to apprentice, which is low barrier of entry, which is becoming a broker. You can go take your license test and all you got to do is just pick up the book and study and go take the test. You can absolutely look, there are brokers out there that make so much more than developers, and all they do is open a door. You know, they open the door and just say, hey, look at this view, look at this apartment. And next thing you know, they're making $1 million commission. And you're like, how did that, like, what happened here? I'm the one who's signing on loans that could take my life away from me in like 2 seconds if the project doesn't go right. And I'm building the building and I'm doing all this hard work. And this guy's opening a door and making more money than me. So becoming a broker, a realtor. There's also people who do debt financing. So debt brokers, that's another like great way to make money in the industry. You can just, you know, go out there. There's a lot of companies that will just take you on commission and say, go out there and find people and just like start, you know, raising debt for that, raising capital. So there are tons and tons of professions within real estate. And I met so many of these people early on in my career who have transitioned from being an appraiser or a realtor, broker, or you name it, to becoming a developer, because they learn so much about the industry that way too, right? Like you become a broker, you're showing tons of apartments, you instantly become probably the most knowledgeable person in your neighborhood about how much stuff rents for. And that's a super valuable tool when you're trying to underwrite a real estate deal.
Right. And you're pretty much there at the beginning, like of the process. So you get to meet the contractors, developers, everyone who put the building together.
Right.
And if you guys attended my estate planning webinar that I did earlier this year, which we talked about life insurance and your estate planning, then maybe you come into some money because of a life insurance policy. And if that's the case, then that's another pot of money that people can use. You can also consider using your retirement plans, right? Like people get pots of money from their retirement plans to help them with their first deals. But there's money out there, and I feel like we should have a conversation also about pooling money together, similar to what Sam is saying, but more on a cooperative thought line of thinking, right? So like myself and Danny and Dorcia and maybe Crystal, we decide, you know, we each have $10,000-$20,000. Oh, and put you in there too, Ibrahim. All right, so we all like $10,000-$20,000. We saw a building in the 79th Assembly District that's just been sitting there for a long time. We find out that it's owned by the city. We figure out how in which we can get access to that. So the other thing I want us to start thinking about and doing is going through our neighborhoods block by block and seeing what's not developed, what's underdeveloped, what's been boarded up for years, and finding out who the owner is of those properties. Even that small thing will help us on our journey to becoming developers or owning a piece of real estate. Just doing that, opening your eyes and seeing that there's vacant properties all around where we live, and start seeing like, well, who owns this? And if it's dirty, please call my office, because then we will get the city to come in there and make them clean it up. But
that's very well said. I don't even know why you have me here. Like you should have led this. That's very well said.
Quick comment / question. First with the comment, when you're doing that initiative, I would love if Sam could be able to.
Wait, which initiative?
the initiative, well, you see, I'm putting thoughts and ideas into your head right now. An initiative where you're doing like a walking tour of your assembly district and you're seeing all these vacant lands and properties, and with Sam as an expert, subject matter expert on your side, questions that you have right then and there on the fly, Sam can be there and assist on
As long
what
as you don't try to outbid me.
Well, you never know. It's a
Outbid
competitive
me.
market. Lots of sharks out there.
No. But
I
that's
will. I want to give you one other tool as well to look
Yeah,
up who owns properties. There is an open source website called oasis.nyc. You can go to Oasis and you can enter an address and you can click on a property and you can learn everything you want to know about it. It will tell you the zoning. It will tell you, it will give you a link to ACRIS, where you can see the deed that was recorded. So who owns the property? It will give you a link to Department of Buildings, so you can see if there are violations or open permits or anything of that sort. So I've used that resource for years and years and years. We still use it in my office. Definitely go to oasis.nyc if there's a property that you're interested in, and you can get as much free open source info on it as possible.
Can my team just put the website in the chat and then you guys can pull it from there? Also, I'll put in there, look for pre-foreclosure and foreclosed properties. Unfortunately, a lot of us are not able to make our mortgage payments, and that's how our properties go into foreclosure. But that may be an entry level way for us as well. The Bronx courthouse and every other courthouse has auctions. I can't remember what day of the week it is. I have to look that up again. But you can go in there and see people are in there trying to buy homes. And they never, I'm gonna tell you who usually are in there. They're usually men that are in there. I rarely see women. I went once in the Bronx. And so I think, one, I need to have my team, if you guys can look up and see when those homes are being auctioned for the borough of the Bronx, and then we could take it from there. And then Deborah had a question. I don't want us to get too far off track.
I had a question. I had a comment, then a question.
You jump in the list. Deborah was on there. I don't want her to. We got to put women first.
All right, Deborah said, are there free courses in the property management?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are there free courses in the property management?
Are there free courses in property management?
To become a property manager?
To become a property manager. I don't know of any free courses to becoming a property manager, but I can tell you that property management firms are always hiring. And there's, again, a very low barrier of entry if you wanted to start in property management. And it's a great way to learn about how to manage a building. Generally speaking, if you wanted to go into property management, you don't necessarily need a college degree, and you can start at a, entry job. And it's a good way to get your foot in the door into the industry, because it's not an easy industry to get your foot in the door. I mean, property management, broker, that's a great way to be able to get your foot in the door to the real estate industry.
And then Danny, you had another question, and we go back to Vlad, and then we go back to Ibrahim.
So Danny said, is this the right time as far as the market is concerned to be an investor?
Great question. Is Danny on here? Can I see?
Danny he's the one that asked about the REIT. I don't know if he's here.
Okay. All right, cool.
This is recording, so we can play it back for him.
Excellent. Okay, sounds good. So to Danny's question, yeah, I actually think it's a really good time to be buying into the real estate market. I think rates are starting to go down. I think that, which is great and helpful for everybody, because you're going to be borrowing a lot of capital to buy a multifamily building. And I think there's going to be some new product coming online in the next year or two. So I think it's a good time to be buying. I mean, look, I would wait until after the presidential election so that we feel like this country will actually be a normal, stable place going forward. Because political climates definitely affect what happens in markets. So, I'm not telling you to wait forever. It's 6 weeks. But I'd probably wait to see the results of the election before jumping into anything.
And then they asked for you to drop your contact information in the chat.
Sure.
And then Vlad, we'll come back to you and then to Ibrahima.
Thank you so much, Assembly Member. Assembly Member, you actually spoke of Black families and, some discontent that Black families can have, especially when it comes to their beautiful homes. Sam, what advice, because there are a lot of misconceptions on real estate developers, both with the general public as well as with government. What advice would you like to share, or can you share, please, with the general public? And what misconceptions can you clear up for both the general public as well as government? And how can you, let's say you have a magic wand and you can put boots on the ground and you can literally affect change tonight. How can you spearhead change in changing the thoughts and minds of people that you want to help?
You're really asking the tough ones tonight, Vlad. Look, I think first and foremost, I think there are some, as I mentioned earlier, some bad apples, in the real estate development world who have given developers a bad reputation over the years. And I will tell you that good developers, we just want to build housing. Like, this is what we do. This is what we know how to do. It's the same as the guy who has a cardboard box factory and he makes cardboard boxes. I just want to make housing, and I want to make housing for as many people as I possibly can. And I think what most people think is that developers are using their own capital and that we are these tremendously rich people who are just rich get richer, and we buy stuff with our own money, we make more money, blah, blah, blah. We're really looking for deals that will make other people money. The substantial money that comes into our deals comes from the large private equity funds, comes from the hedge funds, comes from the insurance companies. They are looking for a certain return hurdle to hit. And if they can't find that in New York, then they take their capital elsewhere. They go and latch on with a developer in Austin, Texas, or Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's a bad thing for all New Yorkers, because we all are aware that there's a housing crisis. Everybody's rent's going up. And the only way to cure that is with supply and building as much supply as we possibly can. So, look, there are bad apples out there, as in every industry, but we really just want to be building as much housing as we possibly can, and I want to build it across the board. I don't care what income band you're in. We all deserve a place in New York City, and so we want to just be building as much as possible to help bring pricing down for everyone.
Thank you so much for that clarity. Assembly Member, did you want to add something?
I don't even know what the question was. So
the question to Sam was, real estate developers tend to get a bad rap, or there are definitely misconceptions on the big bad real estate developer. What ways can Sam clear up that sort of misconception? And you know what? This is a question for you too, Assembly Member. What ways do you, as an elected official, a staple of your community, can empower not only yourself, yet with strategic partners like Sam, to provide access, to provide good? Like, what misconceptions do you want to clear up, whether it be a partnership, however which way, in creating a fruitful relationship between developers and the community?
I guess what I've been doing is just getting information, right? I have a relationship with the real estate board here in New York. I have a relationship with brokers and realtors. And I think the more information that I gain and give to my constituents, that creates a better relationship for us all. So we are clearly understanding what it takes to develop a building. Like right now, I'm pissed that we have a motel, a Super 8 that went up around the corner from, or down the block from my office, around the corner from where I live. And I wonder, for me to get to a place where I'm not upset about it, I need to understand why it's there. And so that's why I have the meetings that I have. with Housing Connect, people kept saying to me, we cannot get an apartment. We're filling out all these lotteries and we're not getting an apartment. So I want to meet with them. So for me, I have conversations with people to get the understanding from their side of why things are the way they are. So when Sam and I met, I knew automatically, I was like, I would love for his information to be shared with more people, just so we can get an idea that we don't always have to just be the homeowner. We can be the developer. We can be the investor. We can be the realtor, the broker, whatever it is. We can be the appraiser, but we need to have access and information. And that's what my job is, to make sure I bring the information to you all and we can go from there. And I just want to allow Ibrahim to ask the two other questions.
Thank you so much.
No, of course, anytime, Vlad.
Thank you for that. So the two, I promise it won't be long, I swear. So the two questions that I have for you was, where can we go to like meet developers? Because I feel like as like business owners, we have like the certifications to, like, I know exactly like where to go to find the contracts. Like I see contracts all the time where they're looking for like homes for homeless shelters and stuff. But where would you advise us that we could go to meet developers? Like what events, and how do you find your events to meet different developers? And then the second question for you was, if you can go to an island and you can only take like 3 tools with you as a developer, what tools would that be? So like a CDFI bank, Oasis, and so on, like something like that. What 3 tools you can't live without?
Okay. So, first question, where would I go to meet developers? I try not to hang out with people in the real estate industry, so I'm probably not the best person to answer that question.
I'll tell y'all where I go, but go ahead, Sam.
Right. No,
I
but
can substitute it.
in all seriousness, what I would say is I would just try to reach out to their companies the same way I did 20 plus years ago. I have people that reach out to me all the time. I really try to make time for as many of them, if not all of them, as possible, for at least like a 15-minute phone call. Just to, you know, there are a lot of young people that want to be real estate developers or want to get into the field. And I know no one took the time for me when I tried to get into the field. So I really try and take time. And I think there are probably a lot of other developers that feel the same. And if not them, then someone else in their office who will be willing to speak. A lot of the larger developers really have people who work on community outreach and have specific people who actually even handle that. So I would encourage you to just reach out direct. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I look, I will tell you, I've even hired people who have reached out direct as like interns over the years, who have then grown to be, you know, a full-time job because I was so impressed with them. But I think people really respect initiative and somebody who's willing to go out there and put themselves on the line and say, look, can you take 10, 15 minutes? I'm trying to get into this. I'd like to learn. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Second part of the question, if I had 3 things that I could take with me in the real estate development world on an island to build, it would definitely be 3 people from my office, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So having the people that really support me and do actual work in my office would be the people that I would want there with me. They're really the, you know, gears that drive the wheels in the organization. So that's, you know, I wouldn't be anywhere I am today without really surrounding myself with just incredibly talented people.
Can I share where
I can. Sorry, wait, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead.
okay. So where I would meet developers. Okay, so when I first got interested in real estate, I used Eventbrite. I used Meetup. I don't even know if people still use Meetup. I use apps that showed me people's interests that have similar interests to myself. And so I would go out to these mixers and just meet people in the field. You all, if you follow me, then you know that I took a group of students down to Atlanta. We went to Invest Fest. That was one of the best places to meet people who are in real estate, developing, whatever it is. I mean, all types of business people were there. And I just so happened to mingle with Councilmember Riley's good friend. He was from the Bronx, but he lived in Atlanta now. And he is a developer. Like he develops he does fix and flips rather, in Georgia. And he got started just by doing this first one. So it's having those conversations with people, going out and meeting people. I would say make sure you're adding value. I know Sam is a great person and he may offer you his time, his 15, 20 minutes to have conversations. But make sure you can add value to someone. Like you don't want to just be able to ask for information without being able to offer someone something. This is just my own personal opinion. Now I'm your assembly member. It's my job to listen to you and to talk to you. So you don't have to add value to me. But when you're going out to look for and talk to investors and developers, make sure you can add some kind of value to them, or make sure you have something to offer. Like maybe go out to coffee, bring them coffee, or to have a lunch date or whatever case may be. But I would say make sure you're adding value. And then one time I had a friend who gave me his lawyer, and his lawyer sat and talked with me for like 10 minutes. And I sent him like an edible arrangement. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you just want to make sure you're saying thank you to people for investing their time into you. So I just want to put that out there.
Handwritten notes are very valuable. Like,
so valuable.
I keep all of them. Like I keep them in my drawers at my office. Anybody who's visited and, then follows up with a handwritten note, it's just a very meaningful thing that I'll always remember.
Small investment, just get some stationery with your name and contact information on it. Quick one-liner, say, thank you so much for your time. I really learned that. And then sign it, drop it in the mail. And then I would just want to push credit unions. I love credit unions, MCU in particular, for a number of things. They do the first-time home buyers workshops, but they also give you those personal loans. And people use those loans to help them with their first purchases, smaller purchases, maybe not the $1 million, investment. Not saying that other banks can't do it, but hold on. Sorry. So the credit unions I push them often as places to get like loans specifically for housing or for personal loans to use to build out your business. And then someone asked about the foreclosure information for the Bronx, and I think my team had added it to the chat. Yes, Sabrina, I think, added it there. Thank you for that. So also YouTube University, I learned a lot from there. You don't have to pay for everything. So make sure that you're learning from that and taking everything with a grain of salt. You cannot just assume just because someone said it online makes it real. So you have to do your research, immense amount of research. Sam, what else? Anything else?
I'm happy to hang on and answer any more questions if anybody else has them. Seriously, like fire away. And if not, then I don't know. I'm tapped out. Otherwise, I gave my spiel, and that's, I'm only good for about like 30.
Please don't be shy, people. Please don't be shy.
I have a comment. If I can, Assembly Member.
Yes, please.
I think that, I would love to see a lot more women being engaged in the development process of, real estate side. I know that, of course, women are involved as brokers and, and so many other facets of the industry, but it's rare to see a woman-led team. And I know Sam is very supportive of that. And his little daughter I keep joking with him, trying to replace him as CEO as soon as she's probably 12. But I just want to make that comment that I thank you for even hosting this. And I see a lot of women on the call. So I hope that, we can be more involved.
Yeah. And we don't have to do it alone. Like I said, we need to start thinking collectively and working together and figuring out how to get our first development and moving it into others. Myself and my colleagues have been walking around Albany as well. It doesn't have to necessarily be in your backyard. You can also look at different parts of the state. to see like what's out there. In Albany right now, like I see properties that go for $40,000. It needs a lot of renovation, a lot of renovation. So I'm not going to act like it's just, spend 40 and you're all good. No, you're gonna have to spend some money on renovation. But if you collectively get, people who can afford to put up some money and then get a loan for the rest, things can happen. Let's just start using this first session to have conversation on what we can do at a later date.
I agree. Like, I'd love to see more women and people of color in the development world. So hopefully we do see more of that. And I mean, what you're doing here is just incredible, Assemblymember Jackson. This is awesome. Like, I want to sign up for all of your, all your.
The webinars are really good. I'm not even gonna hold you guys. Like the webinars.
I mean, this is awesome. Like the fact that you do this for your constituents is really just it's a wonderful thing. It's nice.
Well, I'm trying to break this curse of poverty, and so hopefully they'll remember me when they start making those $1 million deals. Like, don't forget.
I think just the fact that you make yourself available to your constituents like this is such an incredible thing, because I think there are a lot of politicians that don't want to take the time, and just by setting up, really incredible discourse with people, it's just impressive. We need more other good politicians. We need more good developers. We need more good politicians.
Yeah, we need them all. So I think our next thing is the walking tour. We strap on our boots and we go outside in the district and start looking around at properties. Maybe we can bring our council member with us. I see Tariq is on the line. Maybe we can get council member Stevens to come out with us, and we just walk around and see. I know I saw something. I'm not even gonna tell you what block it was on, but I saw something. I was like, "Oh, this is vacant," and I called up one of my council member colleagues and said, "Tell me who owns this." But Sam already told us how to find properties and see who owns it. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Tariq, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say I actually was speaking to the bid already. They have an analysis of all the businesses that are open or vacant or ready for purchase within the corridors of the 161st Street bid. So 161st Street, 167, 170, from Jerome through Morris, they have already a list. It was a study done by SDS. So if anybody's interested, there are about 144 open storefronts in just that area alone.
And that helps me out, right? Like if you can put a good thriving business in the district, that cuts down on our crime, it cuts down on vagrants, like just a lot of stuff that can change the neighborhood and give somebody else a job. So let's start thinking through what we can do together. I want to say thank you again to Sam. Thank you to my team. Okay, TJ, thank you. I want to say thank you to my team for putting this together, to Sam and his team. Vlad, thank you guys so much. Everyone else, we have your contact. We will be alerting you when we have other things coming up. For Crystal, what's our next part of Secure the Bag resource? I know we did estate planning, we did credit already. What else should we be doing?
Financial literacy is going to be next.
Okay, financial literacy. So, we always do that in my office. We want to make sure that we are creating generational wealth and increasing income here in the Bronx, specifically in my district. So please tap into whatever we have coming up and look out for our walking tour. Sam.
Thank you so much, Assemblymember, and thank you to all of you. Like, I know how difficult it is to take this kind of time in the evenings when, you've been working all day and you got kids and responsibilities and everything else that's going on. So thanks for listening to me, because it made me feel good. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And follow us on our social media. Stay alert.